નમસ્તે. આજે તારીખ 15 એપ્રિલ 2023 શનિવારના રોજ સાંજે 5:30 કલાકે ગોવર્ધન સ્મૃતિ મંદિર સભાગૃહ ગુજરાતી સાહિત્ય પરિષદ આશ્રમ રોડ અમદાવાદ ખાતે ઓમ કોમ્યુનિકેશન, રંजना પેંઢારકર, સુકુમાર પરીખના પરિવારજનો આયોજિત વિનોદિની નીલકંઠ લિખિત કદલીવનનો અંગ્રેજી અનુવાદ રંजना પેંઢારકરે કરેલો છે. એ પુસ્તકના લોકાર્પણ સમારોહમાં આપ સૌનું સ્વાગત છે. હું માન્ય શ્રી સ્વાતિબેન જોશી, માન્ય શ્રી રંજનાબેન પેંઢારકર અને માન્ય શ્રી રોહિણીબેન પટેલને વિનંતી કે મંચ ઉપર પોતાનું સ્થાન ગ્રહણ કરે. આપણે ત્રણેય મહાનુભાવોનું ખૂબ તાળીથી અભિવાદન કરીશું. આપનું સ્વાગત છે. આવો, આપનું સ્વાગત છે. આપ જાણો છો તેમ મહિલા લેખિકા દ્વારા ગુજરાતી ભાષામાં પ્રથમ નવલકથા એ કદલીવનનો ઉલ્લેખ છે અને જે ક્લાસિક નવલકથા તરીકે એ ખૂબ જાણીતી છે ને આપણે ઓળખીએ છીએ. ખૂબ પરિશ્રમ કરીને, ઘણો સમય લઈને વિનોદિની નીલકંઠના પુત્રી રંજનાબેને એ અનુવાદ કર્યો છે અને એ પુસ્તકનો આ સમારોહ છે. વિમોચન બાદ આ પુસ્તક બહારથી પણ ઉપલબ્ધ થશે, જે નમ્ર વિનંતી કે આપ એ ખરીદી શકશો. સૌ પ્રથમ આપણે મહેમાનોનું સ્વાગત કરીશું. હું માન્ય શ્રી પ્રકાશભાઈ શાહને વિનંતી કે સ્વાતિબેનનું સ્વાગત કરે. માન્ય શ્રી શૈલજાબેનને વિનંતી કે રંજનાબેનનું સ્વાગત કરે. માન્ય શ્રી ગૌરવભાઈને વિનંતી કે રોહિણીબેનનું સ્વાગત કરે. માન્ય શ્રી પ્રકાશભાઈને પુનઃ વિનંતી કે સુકુમારભાઈનું સ્મૃતિ ચિહ્નથી સ્વાગત કરે. આભાર પ્રકાશભાઈ, આભાર ગૌરવભાઈ, આભાર શૈલજાબેન. કાર્યક્રમની રૂપરેખા એ પ્રકારે રહેશે કે સૌ પ્રથમ રોહિણીબેન વિનોદિની નીલકંઠના જીવન વિશે વક્તવ્ય આપશે અને ત્યારબાદ કાર્યક્રમનો સંચાલનનો દોર પણ રોહિણીબેન સંભાળશે. તો હું માન્ય શ્રી રોહિણીબેનને વિનંતી કરું, આપ આવો અને વક્તવ્યનો પ્રારંભ કરો.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin by giving you a brief life sketch of Srimati Vinodini Neelkanth, the original author, or rather the author of Kadalivan in Gujarati. Vinodini Neelkanth was born in Ahmedabad, Gujarat in 1907. Her mother, Lady Vidya Gauri Neelkanth, was the first woman graduate from Gujarat. That was in 1901. Her father, Sir Ramanbhai Neelkanth, was a renowned writer and a social reformer. Through her enlightened and literary family, Neelkanth was fortunate to receive a rich intellectual, educational, moral and cultural inheritance. In 1928, Neelkanth received her BA degree from Bombay in English Literature and Gujarati. In the same year, at the age of 21, her first book of personal essays, Rasadwar, was published, which was very well received in the halls of Gujarati literature. In 1929, she won a scholarship to the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and she sailed to the US in 1929. She successfully completed her master's degree in sociology and psychology. In 1930, the first Gujarati woman to receive a postgraduate degree from the US. After her return from the US, she became the principal of the Ahmedabad Municipal Girls High School, and later she worked for 10 years as a professor of English at Lal Shankar Umia Shankar Women's College, today's SNDT University. Her tremendous wanderlust took her through Europe on her return journey, and then from the US, and then to China, Japan, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar in 1934. In the same year, she married Manubhai Parikh, who was her fellow student at college in Ahmedabad. He went on to become a businessman, an entrepreneur, and a prominent citizen. They had 4 children: Sukumar, Jagdeep, baby Ranjana, who passed away in 1943 at the age of 1 year, and Ranjana. She contributed to many different genres of Gujarati literature. Collections of short stories, personal essays, travelogues, children's short stories, essays on child care, and one on sociological research. In all, 28 published works are to her credit. She translated several books also. Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice from English into Gujarati, and Bertrand Russell's The Conquest of Happiness. She wrote Kadalivan, the first Gujarati novel written by a Gujarati woman. She was fortunate enough to have a husband who shared her passion for travel, and they traveled extensively in India. She wrote numerous travelogues in her vivid descriptive style, which with a hint which was her trademark, her observational humor, which now hold a permanent position of pride in Gujarati literature. Her other huge contribution in writing was in the field of journalism. Neelkanth wrote a weekly column for about 36 years, no less, called Ghar Gharni Jyot, a light of every home, in the highly popular daily newspaper Gujarat Samachar. These writings had a feminist bent, focusing on women's social and financial emancipation. Her pleasing and straightforward style educated and enlightened 2 generations of newspaper readers, both men and women, from 1948 to 1985, while inspiring scores of women. She became a shining beacon. Her contribution to public life in Ahmedabad was manifold, especially concerning women's education and medical facilities, and last but not the least, she also volunteered to help the highly ostracized community of leprosy patients in Ahmedabad. Vinodini Neelkanth spent her life in the public sphere wearing many hats. She was an educator, a social worker, social reformer, advocate of women's upliftment, a highly principled Gandhian and freedom fighter. However, her most significant role was that of a prolific writer, contributing generously to the annals of Gujarati literature. In 1987, at the age of 80, Vinodini Neelkanth passed away in her home, aptly named Harsh, in Ahmedabad. Ghar Gharni Jyot in Gujarat was extinguished forever. Now I will read a brief message from Sukumar Bhai Parikh, who is present here, and he is the eldest son of Vinodini Ben Neelkanth. My mother Vinodini Neelkanth had written this novel in 1946. It was the first novel written by Gujarati woman author. This novel is now translated by my sister Ranjana, who deserves congratulations for the same. It is being released. It is being released by Dr. Svati Ben Joshi. The function of book release is an important landmark. It is therefore a very happy occasion for me. I am thankful to Swati Joshi and all of you who are present here. Let me extend my thanks to Manish Bhai Pathak of Om Communications and Chintan Bhai of R.R. Sheth and Company. On this happy note, I take your leave. I will now request Ranjana Ben to come to the stage and give her presentation.
Thank you, Rohini Ben. Dr. Swati Joshi, Dr. Rohini Patel, Shri Sukumar Parikh, and ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all. This is a very proud moment for me to be here standing in front of you as the translator of Vinodini Neelkanth's Kadalivan. Kadali means banana and Kadalivan means a banana grove. It is a milestone novel. A milestone, why? Because it was the first novel written by Gujarati woman for the Gujarati literature. You heard that before. It is a milestone because it talks about feminist issues like women's education and empowerment of women. Before this book, there was not any written mention of these issues. As the poet laureate Sri Niranjanbai Bhagat had said, and at the time of the release of her second edition of Gujarati Kadalivan, he had said that this book is the Nandi of feminism. Nandi means the initial offering, initial prayer. So she was a pioneer for the writing of feminism in Gujarat. Though this novel was written in 1946, it does not read as a stale or dated novel. One can very easily relate to the social scenes and the main story and the side stories. On the social scene, the caste system is still very powerful. This is what discussed in this book. Because man and a woman of different caste, they fall in love, and what happens and all. People are killed because you marry somebody who is not from your caste. Love jihads are taking place. Upper caste cannot marry a really lower caste in the same social scene. In the cities, perhaps we feel differently, but unfortunately, most of the Indian society has not really moved on. You see that so many killings take place because girl married, her brother will kill her, and so on. So, class divide between the rich and the poor is still very prominent. Can a rich man or a woman marry a poor person or a Dalit without eyebrows being raised? No. Women are being abused, raped, and controlled. Is there a same level of freedom for women to dress and to make decisions, important decisions, and to take charge of the situation? So what existed in 1946, it still exists in Gujarat. That is why this book is very readable. We can relate to the story. Oh yeah, this thing happened and what happened in my friend, or this whatever that way, you can relate to it. Now the time period of this novel is 1910 to 1928. Almost 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. Hence, another interesting thing covered by Vinodini Ben is the influence of Gandhiji on the society. How people changed overnight. Young people left schools and colleges to join Gandhiji's constructive programs. Many ordinary women became bold and confident about themselves, and they went to jail and took active part in the freedom movement. It was like a magic spell. Of course, this has changed as there is no Gandhiji now. I am not a known translator, and so I would like to tell my humble story of why and how this work was done. This is my second attempt to translate a piece of literature into English. Maybe 40 years ago, Vinodini Neelkanth asked me if I could translate one of her children's story called 2 rupees into English. I said, yes, I dilly-dallied a lot, and then she said, are you going to do it or not? I said, I will do it. So finally I did the job. That story was to go for the competition organized by UNICEF. I am happy to say that the story won the prize. Of course, most of the credit goes to the author, but let me also bask a little bit in the reflected glory. I would like to make a confession at this point. I am Vinodini Neelkanth's youngest child. Yes, she was my mother. I want to tell you the story why I decided to undertake this big task, but we have to backtrack a little. Vinodini Ben always wanted to have a girl child. She had two very handsome and very bright sons. But her desire for a girl child was there. And finally she got a girl and she named her Ranjana. And very sadly, Vinodini Ben lost that precious baby girl. She was devastated. She did not know how to console herself. At that time, she couldn't sleep in the night and things like that. So she was going through the Premanand Nalakyan book, and she chanced upon this couplet. It says, Kadali Stambha Jugal Saheladi Vache Vaidarbhi Kanakani Veladi. There are two like delicate banana stalk, two friends are standing, and in the middle there is Vaidarbhi. Vaidarbhi is the princess of Vidarbha, which is Damayanti. Nal Damayanti. She's looking like a golden vine. She's the most beautiful. This couplet caught her imagination, and the whole novel of Kadalivan was written. So she turned her personal tragedy into this novel. She created the novel. Similar thing happened to me. I was hit by a tragedy in my life when I lost my husband, Jayant. He was my husband for 50 years and he passed away with no notice. I had no time to prepare myself to take life upside down. This happened in 2019. I was living in Mumbai all by myself, and then COVID-19 hit in 2020. All alone, I was getting very depressed, and my tears for Jayant would not stop. I felt I had to get engrossed in something, and I decided at this point to do the translation work of Kadalivan. So, actually, about 10 years ago, I had started doing the translating work of this book, but for no good reason I put it on the back burner, and now I said time to bring it on the front burner. So thus, like my mother produced original Kadalivan, I from my tragedy brought out translation work of Kadalivan. This book is entitled Kadalivan-A Golden Vine in the Banana Grove. First I translated the book and then I started the first round of editing. My cousin Rohini Patel helped me immensely. She gave me innumerable hours of her time selecting the right word. My other cousin Svati Desai, she was our sounding board. She would tell us which word or a sentence which would be fit there properly. With her broad vocabulary, she helped a lot. She also spent many hours helping me. I am extremely thankful to both my cousins Rohini and Swati. Thank you. I would also like to thank my older brother Sukumar Bhai Parikh, who is here, for being a taskmaster. He was my taskmaster. He would ask me every day, what progress have you made? How many chapters have been edited? How much remain now? When will you finish? I felt totally answerable to him. I had to tell him, thank you, Kumar Bhai, for pushing me. And that is why we have the book here today. I am greatly indebted to Shri Manish Bhai Pathak of Om Shweta, of Om Communications for guidance and for valuable help in coordinating the publishing work of this book. I am thankful to Shri Chintan Bhai Sheth of R.R. Sheth and Company for bringing this book out to the world audience. He has given a link, and you can be order online. And so thus the whole field for this book is the whole world. Anybody can read, English can read. Novel set in Ahmedabad makes an interesting read for some of us Ahmedabadis who cannot really read Gujarati literature. Before I conclude, I would like to say that my husband Jayant Pendharkar and my other brother Jagdeep Parikh are not here, they are not alive. But had they been here, they would have been happy for and proud of me. I cannot not mention my father Manubhai Parikh played a huge role in supporting my mother in her all activities, especially literary activities. My parents Manubhai Parikh and Vinodini Neelkanth are blessing me from somewhere, wherever they are. I'm thinking of all these important people in my life, and I pay homage to them at this point. I hope you will read this book and enjoy it as much as I did while translating the book. While I thank you all for being here and making this function a success. I thank you all. Thank you. I will ask Swati, Dr. Swati Joshi.
Pleased and honored to have been asked to introduce our chief guest, Dr. Swati Joshi, who has kindly consented to release Kadalivan, the Golden Vine in the Banana Grove. Dr. Swati Joshi grew up in Ahmedabad, where she had her schooling and undergraduate studies at St. Xavier's College, Gujarat University. She has a master's in English literature from Harvard University in the US and a PhD from MS University, Vadodara. She has participated in seminars and given lectures at many academic institutions and on many occasions, too many to be enumerated here. But I would like to mention some of her published works as well as some other work that she has been doing. Her published works include an edited volume of Rethinking English, Essays in Language and Language Literature History, which is one of the seminal texts on English studies in India. Mapping the History of Consciousness, Gujarati Folk Theatre, different types of history. This is again her contribution to a book edited by Bharati Ray and published by the Center for Studies of Civilizations. Forging Space for Women, Shardaben Mehta's Life and Times. This is the introduction Swati Ben wrote to Reminiscences, Memoirs of Shardaben Mehta, which was translated from Jivan Sambharana, Shardaben Mehta's original book, by her granddaughter Purnima Bhatt. It was published by Zuban. Apart from writing on women, she has also written on what we would call nationalism or national consciousness, etc. Early formulations of the nation, Govardhan Ram Tripathi's Saraswati Chandra in Gujarati. In narrating India, the novel in search of the nation. This is published by Sahitya Academy, Delhi. Dalpat Ram and the Nature of Literary Shifts in 19th Century Ahmedabad, India's Literary Histories, is a series under which this has appeared. It is edited by Stuart Blackburn and Vasundhara Dalmia, published in Delhi, 2004. Her Gujarati publications include 11 volumes of Umashankar Bhai Joshi's literary, cultural and political writings, which were edited and published between 1991 and 2011. They are published posthumously. Umashankar Joshini Vichara Yatra, which she has edited with others, and for which she wrote the most important chapter, which was his intellectual biography. This was in 2011. She has occasionally written on current issues in Nirikshak, perhaps an only Gujarati serious journal focusing on important social, political and cultural issues of society. Sadly, it is in doldrums now, if I may say so, with Prakash Bhai's agreement. Apart from writing and publications, she has also worked in other fields. She's a trustee of Gangotri, a trust founded by Umashankar Bhai Joshi. The trust board organizes annual lectures on a variety of socially, politically, educationally and culturally important issues, but it invites guests always from outside Gujarat, exposing Gujarati audience to a wide variety of issues and concerns and different points of view. At present, she is director of Umashankar Joshi Center for Gujarat Studies, which offers scholarships to many among those who haven't had much chance in their life earlier, not having gone to good colleges. This is to conduct research in Gujarati on various aspects. That has been one of her important works here, and she is very much deeply involved in it. I now hand over mic to Dr. Joshi, Swati Joshi.
I must say I'm feeling a bit strange speaking in English in Ahmedabad to a largely Gujarati audience. But English, we all know, is a universal language of communication. It's also a language of knowledge, and knowledge is power. And therefore, I think we should speak, even amongst ourselves, in English, empower ourselves to reach a larger world of ideas and literatures and peoples of other parts of the world. So no apologies for speaking in English. I congratulate Ranjana Pendharkar. Ranjana Ben to me, because we have known each other since our parents' time, when in the 1950s and 60s, when we grew up, literary friends were like an extended family. So we have memories of those times, and we still cherish them. I'm very glad, Ranjana Ben, that you've done this translation, because I know it's a labor of love for your mother, Vinodini Ben Neelkanth. And I'm sure that Vinodini Ben would have been very proud and happy for both you and the translation. It's an excellent translation, by the way. I recommend it to all of you to read it. It's very gripping and as racy and as pithy and as crisp and fresh as the Gujarati text. So, and also I think that it's good that you translated this because it's long overdue. As all of you said, this is said to be the first Gujarati novel written by a Gujarati woman writer, and therefore it is of historical significance. It should reach a larger audience beyond Gujarat. And we also need more translations like this. So please continue with your translation work. I would like to start briefly with the family of Vinodini Ben, because I think that that's important even in the 20th century and 21st century. As Ranjana Ben just said, that some of the issues which were addressed in the 19th century are still alive, and we still haven't moved much further in terms of social justice for the oppressed sections of society, which is what this novel deals with. Vinodini Ben Neelkanth, as we all know, belonged to an illustrious family on both sides of her lineage. Her maternal great-grandfather, Bholanath Sarabhai, and her paternal grandfather, Mahipatram, were both pioneer social reformers in the second half of the 19th century in Ahmedabad. The 19th century, as we know, there were several reform movements throughout India. And in the wake of English education and Western knowledge, the beneficiaries of this knowledge fought against the social and religious orthodoxies. And in order to improve the condition of people, especially of women, because women were the worst victims of orthodox social systems. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, we all know, was the first progressive reformer who fought for the abolition of sati, practice of sati, and he succeeded in getting the British government to pass a legislation prohibiting it. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar similarly fought for widow remarriage, much against the opposition from orthodox sections of society. But he also succeeded, and he pressured the government to make widow remarriage a legal practice. This is all important because there are widows in this novel, there are problems of their marriage, and it's all very, very closely related. Incidentally, I found that Vidyaben was named after Vidyasagar. Bholanath Sarabhai had decided that if a boy was born, he would be called Vidyasagar, and if a girl was born, she would be Vidyaben. So that's interesting. He was a very great admirer of both these thinkers and reformers. Bholanath was aware of the evil practices of like child marriage and widows not being allowed to marry and remain confined to a life of inhuman tortures and untold miseries. So he started an association called Bal Lagna Nishedhak Mandali, Association to Ban Child Marriage, in 1874. Even in this novel, Kadalivan, there are child marriages. We should talk about that. And later, with others, another association, Vidava Vivah Uttejak Mandali, Association to Encourage Marriage of Widows, was formed in 1876. Women's education was a major agenda for the mercantile elite of Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad was a thriving commercial and trading center since its inception, with textile industry as its base. During the Mughal period, Ahmedabad was one of the most prosperous cities. When the British annexed the city in 1818, there was enough capital in the city to buy machines from England, and Ahmedabad was soon transformed into an industrial capitalist city and passed into a modern age. This is the main character, not the main character, but the chief person here is a textile, is an owner of a textile mill, Shet Manohar Bhai, in this novel. The wealthy elite of the city not only learnt English and gained knowledge of new technology, they were particularly concerned that the women of their families too learnt English and could talk and write and converse in that language. Several schools for middle and upper class girls were opened by the wealthy individuals in Ahmedabad. Maganlal Karamchand started a school for girls in 1849. Harkuvar Shetani, widow of Shet Hati Singh, started another school. Later, Ranchodlal Chotalal also started a school. When Mary Carpenter, who visited Ahmedabad in 1868, writes in her book 6 Months in India that Hindu women of Ahmedabad were far advanced than those in Calcutta and elsewhere in education as well as in their social condition. On her advice, a female training college was established in 1874. Later, the first Gujarat Ladies Club was also established in Ahmedabad in 1988. Vinodini Ben's grandmother, Parvati Kunwar, wife of Maipatram, was very active in the public sphere. By the end of the century, many upper-class women began to come out of their homes and participate in public events. This was Ahmedabad, end of the 19th century. Bholanath and Maipatram, with other reformers, also founded Pratna Samaj in 1871, which was inspired by the Brahmo Samaj of Bengal and the principles of Western Enlightenment. It believed in one God, against the polytheism of Hindu religion, and also rejected orthodox customs, rituals, and social practices associated with it. It undertook activities of social reform and developed a liberal, rational, and secular understanding of religion. Maipatram was also closely associated with Jamaat-e-Islam Anjuman Muslim School in Ahmedabad. By the end of the century, there was a syncretic cultural atmosphere in Ahmedabad, thanks to people like Bholanath and Maipatram. In the early 20th century, many young women equipped with higher education became active and contributed significantly to women's and other social issues. Prominent among them were Vinodini Ben's mother, Vidya Ben, and her aunt, Sharda Ben. The two sisters, granddaughters of Bholanath Sarabhai, who became the first women graduates in 1901 in the entire region of Gujarat. Vidya Ben married the son of Maipatram, Ramanbhai Neelkanth, who was also a social reformer, writer, lawyer, and one of the most active citizens of Ahmedabad, who contributed to almost all spheres of activities in the city. Vidya Ben was also active in many spheres. She publicly took up the cause of widow remarriage. She championed women's education. She held several public positions, as in Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, Gujarati Sahitya Sabha, and Parishad, Akhil Hind Mahila Parishad, and so on. Another prominent woman, Ansuya Sarabhai, who was educated at the London School of Economics, was influenced by Fabian Society, a British socialist organization. On her return, she got involved in the labor movement in Ahmedabad and later with women in the labor movement. She organized workers of the textile mills in Ahmedabad, led the workers' strike in 1918, and later formed Majur Mahajan Sangh in 1920. Rohini Ben has spoken about Vinodini Ben, but I'll just add a few things. Vinodini Ben, of course, as she says, was born in 1907 in this progressive family, which was in the forefront of social reforms. After finishing her college education, she went to the US in 1929 at the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor on a prestigious Levi Barber Fellowship. as a postgraduate student. This was the time, the 1920s, when the women in the US had won the right to vote, and their lives and social conditions were rapidly changing. Vinodini Ben's exposure to this world broadened her own perspective, enriched her knowledge and experience, and she developed a liberal attitude towards things. When she returned to Ahmedabad in 1930, things had begun to change. Gandhiji had arrived in Ahmedabad in 1915 and stayed there till 1930, during which he had launched his freedom movement and started many programs like civil disobedience, salt satyagraha, boycott of foreign goods, promotion of Swadeshi, spinning of khadi, eradication of untouchability, and many other things. This is significant because Kadalivan is set between, you said 1910, Niranjan Bhai says 1907, which hardly matters, but it is certain that the novel ends in 1928 because in the end, Radha, the main character, and Lilavati go to a camp near Bardoli as volunteers to look after the refugees. So this is the year of the historic Bardoli Satyagraha. So the novel ends in 1928. So Radha must be around 20 by then because the novel begins with Radha's birth. So it's about 20 years, 1 year here or there. But what is important is that the major time span of the novel more or less coincides with Gandhiji's presence in Ahmedabad. It is important because it's against the background of Gandhiji's freedom movement that the novel unfolds. Gandhiji had inspired thousands of middle class and upper class women to come out of their homes and participate actively in the freedom movement. Women were particularly engaged in picketing at shops of liquor and foreign cloth. Many started work among Harijans. Ansuya Sarabhai, for instance, set up Harijan Seva Sangh. In the novel, Sohan joins it, and Radha also works for Harijans in Ahmedabad. So it's very, very, it's running, it's really the same time. Mridula Sarabhai, Ammalal Sarabhai's daughter, gave up studies at Gujarat Vidyapith, refused to go abroad for studies. In the novel, again, Sohan refuses to go abroad for studies. He's a very bright young chap. And joined the Congress, Sevadal and Sol Satyagraha. She organized the boycott of foreign cloth and British goods. Inspired by Gandhiji, she founded Jyoti Sangh, a women's organization in Ahmedabad in 1934, the first of its kind. It worked for the improvement of women's condition, providing skills for making them economically independent, and providing legal help and counseling to women who were victims of domestic violence and harassment. Later in 1937, she, with other women like Charumati Ben Yodha, Pushpa Ben Mehta, and others, started Vikas Group to give shelter to women who were abandoned, orphan girls, and old women. The agenda of women's education was also given a push. In 1922, Vidya Ben and Dr. Sumant Mehta, Shada Ben's husband, started and became secretaries of Gujarat Stri Keravni Mandal, Association of Gujarat Women's Education. Shada Ben Mehta started Vanita Vishram Mahila Vidyalaya and a college for women in Ahmedabad. This was the atmosphere in the 1920s and 30s when women not only joined the freedom movement and were visible in the public sphere, but also they were consciously engaged in questioning and changing their social condition. Vinodini Ben too was active in the Satyagraha movement. She had participated and courted arrest during the Dharasana salt Satyagraha in 1927. She also served as she says, she taught later, taught in a headmistress of a school and then taught at a college for some years. As a teacher and public speaker, I was reading about her life where I learned this. She always inspired young girls to become fearless, stand up for themselves and assert their rights. Though Vinodini Ben was active politically and socially, she was primarily a writer. She had been writing since the age of 12. She wrote mainly on women and their issues. The question of women's rights was foremost in her mind. She always speaks about women's rights. And this, I think, was the influence, the Western influence, because she was there at the time when women were also talking about their rights and fighting for that. And then, as she said, she started this column, Ghar Ghar Ni Jyot, which addressed every single issue related to urban middle-class women in Gujarat. It aimed to wake them up, shake them up, make them aware of their rights, urge them to become independent, and regain their self-respect. It is against this intellectual formation and political formation ideas of Vinodini Ben that we should see Kadalivan as a novel. Vinodini Ben wrote Kadalivan in 1946. As Niranjan Bhagat has noted, she was the first Gujarati woman to write a novel. As she talks about the genesis of the novel, she says that she was overwhelmed with grief after the death of her 8-month-old daughter, when she chanced upon 2 lines from Premanand's Nalakyan. The couplet runs thus, Ranjana talked about it, Kadali stamba jugal sa heladi, vacche vaidharbi, kanakni veladi. There stand, by the way, Niranjanmi talks about this, I mean, this is a detour, but she said that Vinodini Ben wrote this to overcome her personal grief. She translated it to overcome her personal grief. In the Mahabharata, this is what Niranjan Bhai says, in the Mahabharata also, this story of Nal and Damayanti is told to Yudhishthira to overcome his personal grief of having lost Arjun for some long years. And Premanand also narrates this to the king, I forget his name, to relieve him of his personal grief. So it somehow suggested the whole thing with, I mean, that's a very emotional connection that one finds. This is how it's, so she says, there stand amidst banana trees those 2 lovely maidens, and in between there shines this Vaidarbhi, like a golden creeper. And she says, I quote, the vision of the 2 heroines, Swati and Yamini, and of Radha between them, became the germ of the idea for my novel, unquote. The novel derives its inspiration and title from this literary source. Kadalivan is also the name of the residence of Sheth Manohar Bhai, a prominent, wealthy textile mill owner of Ahmedabad at the turn of the century, 20th century. Quote, I quote again, considered a learned man, connoisseur of art, a social reformer, and an economist. In short, a man of wealth and therefore of prestige. A self-made man, he represents the nourish of the city, who had come into wealth because of the huge opportunities thrown up by Ahmedabad's transformation into a capitalist industrial city. His main aim in life is to pursue and amass wealth, which finally ruins him. He is surrounded by sycophants like Chandulal, who exploit him and become the cause of his ruin in the end. Kadalivan is a sprawling palatial bungalow in Shahibagh with outhouses and servants' quarters. Its interiors are lavishly decorated with objects of art. It has a huge garden with fountains and pots, a sign of affluence and high tastes. And in the back, it has trees, especially a grove of banana trees, a cuddly one, from which both the house and the novel derive their names. Manohar Sheth lives with his two children, Anand Mohan and Swati, there, with Umya Mashi. Manohar Sheth's Masi, who raised him and his sister Vasumati when their mother died soon after childbirth. Umya Mashi, herself a child widow, lives in a cottage, outhouse, next to the bungalow, and also raises the Sheth's children when his own wife, Shobha Shethani, dies young. Vasumati, his sister, and her famous lawyer husband Prabhakar's children, Jayadev, Yamini, Meera, and Kalyan, are also raised at Kadalivan by Umya Mashi. The novel begins with the birth of Radha, driver Govind Singh's daughter. Instead of a baby boy that the parents and others had desired, a baby girl is born to them. The novel begins by rejecting a social prejudice in favor of sons to daughters, which is even now prevalent. And this is how she keeps on in the novel, one after another. Prejudices and customs and beliefs are broken and rejected as the novel progresses. Radha's mother Reva too dies days after her birth, and she is brought up by an elderly neighbor Jumkumar. When she dies, Govind Singh moves to Kadalivan with little Radha in one of the one-room quarters there. This is how Radha arrives in Kadalivan. Radha had earlier played with the children of Kadalivan, but now she becomes a part of the Kadalivan family. She grows up with Svati, who is a year older to her, and Yamini, who is 3 years younger than her. They play together and go to school together. As the novel unfolds, one gets a deeper insight into these three beautiful young girls who are quite different from one another. May I read a passage from the novel, which really describes it quite well? The chapter is the trio. It's called the Triputi, Gujarati ma. How they're growing up together. And one day, what happens? Today being Sunday, this trio was relaxing on the brick seating under a big gulmohar tree in the garden. It was dusk. The girls had an arboreal canopy full of flowers over their heads. Red and yellow gulmohar flowers strewn under their feet were covering the earth like a veil. Beautiful description. There are very beautiful descriptions of nature.
Difficult to translate.
But it's so wonderfully translated. Let me finish it and then I was going to compliment you anyway. All three friends were looking up, this is important, looking up at the western sky where the fall clouds, autumn clouds, had put on a beautiful display of colors. But each girl saw the clouds differently. Radha was trying to time the changing colors of the clouds. When did they change from orange to red? And at which moment did they turn purple? Yamini was busy discerning various human and animal shapes in the changing clouds. And Svati, on the other hand, was thinking deeply about which of the colored clouds would suit the girls the most, imagining them to be saris instead. And in this way, the three of them occupied themselves talking and laughing over these light-hearted matters. Though they are light-hearted, they're quite revealing, as we can see that Radha enjoys life in its simple things. Yamini is very playful and boisterous, and Swati, her love for material possessions and always comparing. She always compares what would look nice on her, what would look nice on me. I mean, it's like that. She's always, her vanity, I would say, is something that we notice here, but very well said and very well translated. Radha, as Radha reveals at the end of the novel, she did experience a class difference. This is important because she is a poor driver's daughter. Between her and the other two when she was a child, she desired, as a child would, to have dresses and things like the other two had, and asked her father for it, when he would remind her that they were rich and she a poor driver's daughter. She plucked bananas from the trees and is therefore called a banana wali girl. The more arrogant, class-conscious male members, Chandulal, Prabhakar, and even Manohar Sheth, consider and address her as a driver's daughter. She's always addressed as a driver's daughter by these superior men. Swati, who is always conscious of her superior status, is jealous of Radha because she is loved by others, including Sohan, her mother's friend Madhuben's son, whom she also desires. She behaves quite arrogantly and condescendingly with Radha while playing a game of Kho-Kho. When Radha chooses Sohan for her side, Swati starts crying and insists on having Sohan on her side. Being a rich man's daughter, she thinks she must have the best of everything. When Sohan is concerned about Radha's college education after she finishes school, Swati brushes aside the thought as something beyond the means of poor people who can't afford it. Later, when she discovers that Radha and Sohan had decided to get married, she taunts Radha. I quote, "You grew up in our house and you spoilt it for us," unquote. Manohar Sheth too considers Swati the cause for, Radha, the cause for Swati's unhappiness. He's contemptuous of Radha, and when he realizes that what his daughter had lost was won by Govind Driver's daughter. Prabhakar also feels that Radha has become too big for her boots in the society of Kadalivan. All of them betray a clear class bias against Radha. But Radha is liked by the other inhabitants of Kadalivan. Umyamashi adopts her as a daughter, and Radha gets her second foster mother. Vasumati's children are very fond of Radha. They admire her leadership qualities and always defend her on occasions of quarrel with Swati. They lovingly call her Radha Rani. Yamini becomes Radha's close and loyal friend. Even Madhuben, Sohan's widowed mother, prefers Radha to Swati as Sohan's partner. Sohan, of course, is drawn to Radha for her unpretentious simplicity. Later, inspired by Gandhiji, the two become partners in pursuit of a common dream of freeing the country and serving the people. Radha becomes, in more ways than one, as the title suggests, the central character, Vaidarbi, the princess, who is surrounded by other beautiful people. Radha has qualities that other children don't have. She is a tenacious little girl who likes to do difficult things and succeed, like putting the chain on the door, which she can't reach, or plucking bananas from the trees, which too she can't touch. She is also strong-willed and doesn't give in to the whims of others. She refuses to be submissive, timid, traditional village girl. She even speaks her mind to her father about her future when he suggests that he would like to take her to the village and find a suitable boy in the community to marry her. But Radha is determined to pursue her studies, be independent, and she is ambitious to achieve something in life and carve her own path. Later, when Swati holds her responsible for her broken marriage, Radha refuses to give in to her pranks. As the novel puts it, I quote, "Radha might have come from an humble background. She was not subservient and had it within her to stand up for herself, prove her innocence and escape Swati's unjust punishment," unquote. Also, when Yamini disappears and her father Prabhakar threatens Soumyamashi to sue her for being responsible for his daughter's action, Radha retorts, and I quote again, Vakil Sahib, please hold your tongue. If you utter even one disrespectful word about our Mashi, you will not be able to enter this house again. This I, Govind driver's daughter, can also tell you without any fear. So how fearless she is and how she can stand up for the right things. Radha is the new woman Vinodini Ben always wanted women of her time to be. Though from humble origins, she grows equipped with education into an intelligent, independent and fearless woman. After finishing her studies, Radha is drawn to Gandhiji's movement, takes to spinning and making her own khadi fabric. Sohan too was attracted to Gandhi's call to serve the nation. Instead of seeking limelight, he chose to work in the remotest villages amongst the Harijan community. He also refused to go abroad to pursue his dream of becoming a scientist and risks, I quote, condemnation from all sections of society by working with those, scorned and oppressed people. Sohan represents the idealist young man who joined the national movement for a better future of the country. This time, no? No? I mean, Swati is quite different, and she is, I will not go into the whole thing, but she's very, as I said, she's jealous of Radha and she doesn't like. But when she learns that Radha and Sohan are going to marry, she rushes herself into a hasty marriage. And she is. Varta chalu rakhu.
10 minutes more.
10 minutes more? No.
Okay. Whatever.
15 minutes more. I was told 1 hour, and it's not been, I mean, there are 15 minutes left anyway. So after that, you can. Anyways, let's not get into that. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting thing, to see these girls developing in different ways in the novel. And as I said, she does this, and she's not able to accept that Swati and that Radha and Sohan are getting married, and she takes it as an insult and her defeat, and therefore she decides to on the spur of a moment to marry Sharat Chandra, the richest bachelor of Mumbai. Of course, she scoffs at the idea of Sohan's marriage with Radha, as she would never have married a man who had sacrificed her worldly ambitions and was living on a meager income. She would never think of a marriage with Sohan. In fact, she had never loved him, but as she always said, she kept him as a standby if she didn't find a suitable boy. Her priorities are different. She chooses not man but the wealth, which would ensure an extravagant and comfortable life. For Swati, love and marriage are not for personal happiness or individual freedom, but matters of competition and bargain. Swati chooses a Hindu wedding. This is important because, again, there's a critique of Hindu wedding in the novel by the progressive people. I mean, I have read Shardaben's autobiography, and she really, tells her children and other women to not have expensive weddings, because that was the practice anyway. That is what it is. She does because it would allow her an ostentatious display of wealth. Sohan criticizes such weddings and asks Radha to boycott her wedding. Radha too complains to Sohan that, I quote, the wedding was such a blatant waste of national resources in a poor country like India, with its naked and hungry masses. Inordinate expenses at weddings, which was and still is a prevalent practice, that was nothing but a vulgar display of wealth by the rich and unbearable burden for the poor. But people with reformist and idealist bent had always opposed it, as do Sohan and Radha in the novel. Besides, the Gandhian way of thinking would always see it as an unjust and improper waste of wealth in a poor country like India. Swati then discovers that her husband was morally and physically unfit to be a husband, an important man leading a wayward and immoral lifestyle. Outraged at this discovery, she confronts Chandulal, who was responsible for fixing her marriage. Chandulal sexually assaults her, and Swati becomes pregnant with his child. She considers several options, abortion and suicide, but she would never do any of these things. For her, life is too precious. I mean, these things are not really worth it for her life. She even goes to the extent of suggesting that she could say that it was Radha's child. She could go and, deliver the child and it would be treated as Radha's child, or that Sohan was the father of her child, So it's something, this is partly to gauge Radha's responses, but it just shows what a vicious mind she had. And she could really, devise all these brilliant but very devious designs. Both Umia Mashi and Hasmukh Bhabi, they offer her help to adopt her and to take her. Umia Bhabi says that she can be her child. But there's a very interesting aside here also. When Hasmukh Bhabi tells Swati that, and I quote, "Each child is created by man and woman, but in our case, this child will belong to two sisters-in-law." Very interesting observation, unquote, hinting that the biological father is irrelevant or redundant, and a child can be raised by two women in a spirit of sisterhood. It's a very radical idea. Yamini, she deserves all our attention. Yamini, as the author rightly says, deserves to be a heroine of some other novel, other story. She is a rebellious and emancipated young woman, strong, assertive, confident, feisty, and passionate. She breaks all taboos, and she has clipped her hair short, right? And she wears saris, not in a typical Gujarati style, to appear different from others. Not only students, but even professors are intimidated by her in college. Her mother, Vasumati, married to a famous lawyer of Ahmedabad, had a disdain for raising children. In fact, she had no love for her own children, and like so many of the wives of the civil servants, was fond of club life, playing rummy, bridge, and tennis. Her husband, a womanizer, indulged his wife all her whims. They, of course, disapprove of Yamini's love for Balakram, a bright student at college who is planning to go abroad to appear for the civil servants exam, after passing which he might be appointed as a collector of Ahmedabad, or better still, a judge in a father's court. But Balakram happens to belong to the barber's caste. This is another angle in the story now, the caste question. Her parents fear that they would be gossip in the parties they attend. They would lose face in high society, and they are outraged. They forcibly take Yamini home to free her from what they think was the evil influence of Mashi and Radha. Yamini, however, is brutally honest, outspoken, and critical of her parents. In a letter she writes to them, she reminds her father of the illicit affair he had with a barber widow. There you are, Dhani, and the illegitimate son they had, who was sent away to an orphanage. She exposes his hypocrisy. She also absolves them of their responsibilities towards her, since she would soon turn 18, an adult who will be legally independent. This is something very important, and this reminds me somewhat of Vinodini Ben's own marriage, and how she had, it's interesting, I read it, had stood up and in defiance of her mother's, Vidya Ben's wishes also. So this is very, very interesting. So here is a woman who who will not really, who will do what she desires and marry the person she loves at any cost. Her decision to leave home, to disappear till her exams because of the abuses hurled by her parents at Balakram is an independent and bold decision. She goes to Vadpipli village to stay with Govind Bhagat, Radha's father, in order to prepare for exams. The foolish parents are clueless and desperate about their out-of-bounds girl, that is what they call her. But Mashi is assured that Yamini has, and this is Mashi's understanding of Yamini, she has inner strength and that she is capable of looking after herself. Yamini travels alone on the trains on her way to the village, on the way to the village. She usually traveled by third class in order to know and mix with people from lower sections of society. This shows that she is a fiercely independent girl, and she breaks all social barriers to live life on her own terms. This would be unheard of, that a woman travels in third class all by herself. And she has to face questions, as she says, as co-passengers ask her why her hair was cut and why she was not married and what would she do with her education of English. So she faces all these questions, but she persists. And when she goes to the village, there also in the bus, people observe and say, such a beautiful girl, all by herself, with nobody accompanying her. These things are not done, by a woman, not done by a woman. I mean, that is what it is, and this is what she does. And so this is, that's Yamini. She meets, she also observes the village life and the ways of the village and the traditions and customs and all that. She befriends Dhabu, a distant niece of Govind Bhagat, who is a child widow. There are several widows in this novel. Yamini approves of her, who likes her, because she has an independent mind and a rebellious nature like her, as Dhabu had run away from her stepmother's tortures to live her own life. Once on an evening walk, she encounters a woman of 19-20 called Resham, who, as Dhabu informs her, is remarried as a widow because she belongs to a caste which allowed it. Whereas Dhabu's community of Garasyas did not allow it, so she wasn't remarried. The question of widow remarriage, which was one of the main issues of reform in the 19th century, was still a fraught one in the 20th century. Most women in the novel are married early in life, they are child marriages, and some of them died soon after childbirth, like Radha's mother Reva and Manohar Sheth's mother and wife. There are several widows in the novel, most of them victims of child marriage and therefore child widows, such as Umyamashi, Dhabu, and Resham. Umyamashi is not married. It may be noted that Gandhiji was not in favor of widow remarriage, and he appealed to the widows to dedicate their lives to social service. In the novel, Madhuben, who is also a widow, is engaged in activities of several organizations. Umyamashi's life is devoted to the service of all those who needed her help, including Kanku. There is another woman, Kanku, a woman from her village whose nose was chopped off by her husband, and therefore virtually an abandoned woman like a widow. She's also, even though she has a husband, she lives a life of a lonely woman like a widow. Both Umyamashi and Jamkuma are childless widows who raise the children of others with the love of a mother. Dhabu, like other women, has also accepted the injustice without ever questioning it, whereas Yamini finds these disparities unjust. Dhabu also thinks that Sohan cannot marry Radha because out of caste is out of caste. That's what she says. Yamini tells Dhabu of her love for a man from a Barber caste. When Dhabu finds it difficult to accept, Yamini replies, and I quote, "But Dhabuba, God never made castes such as Brahmins, Barber, or dead. These classifications are made by us, human beings. This is a very, very important statement. Govind Bhagat also has a similar vision of a world without caste and class differences, where all are equal, though he doesn't talk about gender aspect. But he does. He has reconciled himself to Radha's wedding to Sohan, because he says, even if I'm outcast, if I'm excommunicated by my caste, it doesn't matter to me. Once my daughter is married, what more do I want? So this is how his response to the caste equations are. This is one of the major concerns of the novel, which is to expose and reject rigid caste structures in society. Radha and Sohan's, as well as Yamini and Balakram's relationships of love and prospective marriage are intercaste relationships. Very, very important. Again, as she said, that even today you can't do that. And if you do it, you're killed. I mean, today it's become much worse. There is so much of violence. But it was not possible to do this even in the 20th century. And these two major women in the novel do it. One marries a man of a lower caste, the other, a lower class woman, marries a man of the upper class, an upper caste. So there are two kinds of, in Gujarati we say anulom and something, pratilom lagna, je hoy. But this is a very radical, very radical development in the novel, because the main characters practice what they believe in. It's not just, this is not a programmatic novel. This is not a doctrinal novel. It is a novel which makes its points through the way these characters live their lives. And that is what really makes it very, very interesting. So by showing these relationships for what they are, the novel opens up a direction towards an inclusive and just society, which we have not yet achieved. The statement that castes are not divinely ordained, but constructed by human beings to create and maintain social hierarchy and power by the rigid social and religious orthodoxies is a progressive view leading to meaningful radical social change. But the woman question remains center stage in the novel. The novel shows how Gandhiji's influence transformed lives of thousands of women and made them independent women with a purpose in life. In the novel, Lilavati, villain Chandulal's wife, who is a typical, simple, uneducated, submissive Gujarati housewife, who tolerates her husband's evil practices and oppression without a word of complaint and has no identity of her own. She is called a dried date, Sukki Kharik, by Jaydev, as she is drained of all life and luster. There is nothing in her life. She lives because she is not dead. That is what the novel describes. I wish I could read all that. Very beautiful description of how she lives the life of an abject and failed woman. By the way, the children of Kadalivan have quite a knack of naming others. They all detest Chandulal and have named him as Chokri no Gulam, Jack of Diamonds, he's called. So there's so much of humor also in the novel all the time, which is also aimed at exposing this characters or revealing their, lives and all that. Lilavati wears voile saris and her petticoats have foreign-made lace attached to them. She wears this foreign cloth without knowing anything because she is not even aware of what's going on. So Radha takes her to a meeting addressed by Gandhiji, who tells women to wear khadi, spin their spinning wheel, boycott liquor and foreign cloth, accept the untouchables and fight for their rights. Lilavati is mesmerized by Gandhiji. On her way back from the meeting, she stops at a khadi shop, buys khadi clothes for herself and never looks back. She joins women's wing of Sevadal, starts picketing at foreign cloth shops and even lands herself in jail. It is as if she is reborn. Her curiosity to learn and commitment are complete. With the help of Radha, she learns about history, geography, where did they come from, what do the British do here, what is the constitution, what are the laws, and what's the history. All that, she's so curious, and she learns all that. And especially, what is a woman's place in the Hindu law? This is very important. Again, Vinodini Ben again and again, emphasizes the fact that women should know the law, because that is very important towards their liberation, emancipation. So she learns all this. She gains tremendous confidence and self-esteem in the process. And most importantly, she breaks the patriarchal myth that women have no brains. Lilavati is an illustration of transformation of women suffering under oppressive patriarchy. It is also an illustration of Gandhi's influence on women, how he brought women into the public sphere and made them aware of their rights. Lilavati also avows celibacy, thus liberating herself from her husband's sexual tortures. Lilavati's transformation from a submissive woman to a strong individual and independent woman who breaks free of oppressive patriarchal shackles opens up space for other women to similarly transform their lives. The novel successfully employs the Gandhian discourse on women in the narrative of Lilavati. And finally, in the end, we see what happens. In the end, Manohar Sheth is shorn of all his worldly possessions, including Kadalivan, the house he built and lived in. Chandulal deceives him in a business deal. He has ruined the lives both of the father and his daughter. The Sheth tries to commit suicide, the deafening noise of which, I like this translation, jolts Kadalivan to its core. This is very metaphorical also. Kadalivan is undone in an instant, and this is how it's described. And as the novel puts it, and he loses eyesight, and Swati, in all this flurry, has a miscarriage. Manohar Sheth's nest, the sprawling Kadalivan, is undone in the end. The undoing of Kadalivan is the undoing of the world Manohar Sheth created and which he represented. It's a world of affluence and privilege, of ostentatious lifestyle, also a world of old social order and orthodoxy, which does not accept or respect socially less privileged sections, which practices gender, class, and caste discriminations. All men in the novel do that. And a world of male chauvinism and infidelities displayed by all these men in the novel. All these men have extramarital or sexual relationships with other women. In the end, the inhabitants of Kadalivan moved to other places. The Sheth and Swati moved to Govind Bhagat's home in Vadpipli village, where a different social order prevails. Radha and Lilavati leave for a camp near Bardoli, where farmers from the historic Bardoli Satyagraha and their families have gathered as refugees. They all move into a larger world which holds promises of a different social order. Is open-ended, so we don't know where it's going, but it's certainly moving away from the world that was represented by Kadalivan and moving in different directions. In any case, those who have spent their childhood in Kadalivan have grown into bright and beautiful young people. Equipped with education and infused with idealism, they have become independent, intelligent, concerned, and responsible individuals. Towards the end of the novel, they engage in a debate on socialism, a political creed young Jaidev has embraced. The debate in the 1920s about socialism as a political organization and political organization and Gandhian politics is reenacted here. There was a debate that some people advocated socialism, which was an import from Russia and other countries, communism and all that, and they had a different economic agenda, and they had a different way of fighting independence. And anyway, I don't want to go into that. But so there is this, Radha and Sohan believe in Gandhiji's methods and programs to attain independence for the country. They believe in Gandhiji's program rather than in socialist or socialism as a political medium to attain independence. Though they all believe in socialism as a principle and want socialism as an ideology of equality for all to be realized in India, Radha knows too well from her own life's experience what discrimination between the rich and the poor means. She says, I quote, "These two words, rich and poor, were so unbearable to me then," that is in her childhood, unquote. Even Umia Marshi participates in the debate. She asks, can an economic revolution be brought about in the country through Gandhiji's path of non-violence, unquote. This was a raging debate at that time, whether it was possible to reconcile Gandhiji's principle of non-violence with Marx's idea of social justice. This is also a very interesting debate. Sohan too believes in the implementation of socialism. Yamini too has developed a renewed rigor for this kind of thinking while she's been away in the villages. She's really happy to see the end of Kadalivan. As she says, she suffered from a sense of guilt as being connected to the world of affluence. And she says, my friends used to call me an armchair communist, and therefore, she taunts Jaydev also that, you have a drink in your golden cup and all this, and you talk about this. So they have fun also. I mean, this is something that, and this is very true that they were armchair communists also at that time. But these people are, and Jaydev, of course, is genuinely happy to see the disintegration of the place. These young men and women are committed to contributing towards a freer and more equal and inclusive future world. Throughout the novel, and in their own lives and in their interaction with others, they have questioned and rejected ideas and actions which betray class, caste, and gender discrimination. They represent a new world that the reformers in the 19th century had paved the way for, and in which Gandhiji's freedom movement had opened a space for. In many ways, Kadalivan is a novel representative of its time. Gandhiji's presence looms large in the novel. Gandhiji's influence on the women, as we have seen, which was to make them participate in the freedom movement in the public sphere, which made them feel empowered. His economic programs, his attempts at eradication of untouchability, as well as introduction of socialism as a political ideology, had raised issues of class and caste discrimination. All this find expression in the novel. So this is what makes it a very, very important, historically very significant novel. It may be called, and I'm saying it with great trepidation, a feminist novel of the Gandhian era. Please forget it, because I myself don't like this kind of labels. But, and besides, the novel has a different understanding of these issues also. But it does. The Gandhi is there in the novel and is doing all things. So Kadalivan, what makes Kadalivan, and I'm about to finish, a little classic is its scope, its delineation of a whole range of people and places outside the central family and its narrative. Of course, its main focus is on the empowerment of women and empowered women. It shows different ways in which women come into their own, not only as independent women with an identity, but also as socially responsible individuals. The question of gender equality is not just confined to breaking free of the shackles of patriarchy. Women like Radha, Yamini, and Lilavati become agents and active participants in the making of and changing history. What is, however, really important is that the novel extends its scope to include and address other forms of injustice in society. It is through the lives of these women that the injustices of class and caste are confronted and rejected. As Radha contests class discrimination and Yamini contests caste discrimination. Kadalivan will always remain relevant. as long as these injustices continue to exist in society, as you said very, very aptly, I'm just repeating what she said, that the novel is very relevant today because today also in much more serious way we are confronting these problems. As long as these injustices continue to exist in society, but more importantly, for his contribution towards creating a world free of all injustices. Thank you.
I thank Swati Ben for her very, very interesting lecture. I hope you also all enjoyed. My only complaint is she gave away the game. She has told the whole story. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just pulling your leg. You are like my younger sister, so I'm doing that. Now, I wanted to say that I have a big problem of omission. When I was talking, I was reading and I don't know when my glasses were not on or whatever, but after my initial round of editing, I had to polish the English and had to, somebody else also read it so that it comes smoothly. So I asked my two daughters, Namita and Amrita Pendharkar, and they helped me in the final round of editing. And I used to, with the good writing skills and large vocabulary, they painstakingly went through each chapter. We used to laugh and I used to tell them that you too need to English it. Across the several time zones and many miles apart, we brought the book to the present form. I thank both my daughters from the bottom of my heart. And this is what I wanted to share with you. It was like 2 generations are doing this whole thing, and so it was nice. And I thank you all for coming, and we have some refreshment outside, so please help yourself. And now, Manish bhai, please.
સૌ પ્રથમ તો મંચસ્થ મહાનુભાવોનો આભાર. આપ સૌ સમય ખર્ચીને આવ્યા એ માટે આપનો આભાર. આ કાર્યક્રમની નોંધ જે કે ગુજરાતી અંગ્રેજી અખબારો લીધી છે, તમામ અખબારોના તંત્રીશ્રી, રિપોર્ટરશ્રી, ફોટોગ્રાફરશ્રીનો આભાર. કદલીવન અંગ્રેજી પુસ્તક બહાર અવેલેબલ છે, જેની કિંમત 200 રૂપિયા છે, પણ આજે 180 રૂપિયામાં આપણને મળશે, જે બહારથી લેવા નમ્ર વિનંતી. અને રંજનાબેને કીધું એમ બહાર નાસ્તા અને આઈસ્ક્રીમની વ્યવસ્થા છે, એને પૂરતો ન્યાય આપવા વિનંતી. એક સમૂહ તસવીર લીધા બાદ કાર્યક્રમ પૂર્ણ જાહેર થશે. આપ સૌનો પુનઃ આભાર.